China's campaign to make the yuan a more prominent feature of global finance and commerce is also served by this. Alexander Gabuev, a senior fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, said Moscow has jettisoned concerns about giving China too much leverage over its economy. For Russia and Putin, depending on renminbi is the only rational choice, according to Mr. Gabuev. The Russian Ministry of Finance said the yuan is taking an increasingly important role in its sovereign wealth fund. The ministry started selling yuan in January to plug its widening budget deficit. The share of Russian exports paid for in yuan rose to 14% by September, according to data from the central bank. This is up from 0.4% before the start of the war. China's central bank didn't respond to a request for comment. Russia began cutting its dependence on the dollar in 2014 after its annexation of Crimea. By 2018, the country began to sell its holdings of U.S. Treasury bonds and explore trade in rubles and other currencies. De-dollarization went into overdrive and widened to include the euro last year. Western countries froze some $300 billion of Russia's foreign reserves and banned some of its banks from the SWIFT messaging system in response to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Russians don't face an outright ban on using dollars or euros. Non-sanctioned banks continue to do business in foreign currencies. Booming trade between Russia and China added to the yuan's appeal. China has become a major buyer of Russian oil that is shunned by the West. Russia has grown more dependent on China for semiconductors and other technology. Russian companies have also turned to the yuan and issued bonds in the Chinese currency worth the equivalent of more than $7 billion last year. The yuan-ruble was often the most traded currency pair on the Moscow exchange based on daily volume in recent weeks. Aluminum giant Rusal was the first company to issue yuan bonds inside Russia last August. Other commodity exporters like oil firm Rosneft followed. Most trade with China and can use yuan raised for everyday business. Bystrodengi, a Russian lending platform, started selling yuan bonds last year. Despite not doing any business in the Chinese currency, the company's chief finance officer said borrowing in yuan was far cheaper than rubles. Its bonds offer a coupon rate of 8% instead of the 19% that it likely would have had to pay to borrow in rubles. The Russian broker that arranged Bystrodengi's previous ruble bond offerings ran the deal. Buyers were predominantly individual Russian investors. Some brokers weren't fully set up to sell yuan securities, with some displaying incorrect information about Bystrodengi's bonds. Some didn't allow investors to buy bonds using their app, instead requiring trades be done over the phone. Nearly 50 countries, including some in Europe, Africa, and Latin America, have already used or plan to use the yuan or ruble in their foreign exchange reserves or bilateral trade with China and Russia. The use of the yuan and ruble could potentially challenge the dominance of the US dollar in global trade and finance. However, the US dollar remains the world's primary reserve currency, and any significant shift towards the yuan and ruble is likely to be a gradual process rather than an abrupt change.